Hey y'all, Ryan Sprague here. As you all know, the Somewhere in the Skies podcast is always free to consume, but it isn't free to create. That's why I've started the Somewhere in the Skies Patreon campaign. On a monthly basis, you give what you think the show is worth. You'll be helping the show continue, grow, and to be something truly communal. And remember, there are rewards for each level of contribution, and the list is only growing. So please, help Somewhere in the Skies now by becoming a patron. To contribute and to learn more, visit www.patreon.com/somewhereskies. Thank you for your support. And now, on with the show.
This is Somewhere in the Skies with Ryan Sprague.
Welcome to Somewhere in the Skies. I'm your host, Ryan Sprague. Today on the show, we talk to former government employee and UFO investigator, Shane Hurd. Shane has spent his career in the fields of civil engineering, geographic information systems, and information technologies. It was the Phoenix Lights incident in his hometown of Phoenix, Arizona, that sparked his interest in UFOs. Since that time, he studied the subject and ultimately joined MUFON as a field investigator. Today, we talk about some of the most compelling cases he's investigated, and then we dive deep into some of his fascinating articles he's written over at Rogue Planet. How was the late John McCain connected to the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident? And why do a huge number of UFO reports involve witnesses claiming complete silence during a sighting? This and so much more right now. Shane, thank you so much for joining me today on Somewhere in the Skies.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
I am excited to finally get you on. It's taken long enough, my friend.
Well, fellow Planeteers, too.
Exactly, yes. For those who don't know, Shane is one of our Rogue Planeteers over at rogueplanet.tv, so check out all of his articles over there. We're going to be bringing some of them up tonight, so I'm excited to do that. They can get a little tease of what you've been up to over there. But before we even get to that, Shane, I want to know, since this is going to be airing right at the end of December, what is your favorite UFO event or case or even story from this past 2018? Putting you on the spot here. Anything really stick out to you?
Oh, boy. Yeah, I mean, lots happened, right? I'd have to say anything related to ATIP. That is fascinating to me right now.
Yeah. I mean, we had, it's been almost a year now since we learned from the New York Times, from To the Stars Academy, about the secret Pentagon UFO program. And I mean, a lot of us probably had some inclinations that something was going on behind the scenes, but the fact that the Pentagon was investigating this stuff, that was news to me, man. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I mean, for me, I would even say this is one of the most significant events that have occurred in ufology in I don't know how long. I mean, when you think about it, for the better part of 50 years, whatever that is, from 1969 on, the United States government has denied until they're blue in the face that they had any interest whatsoever in UFOs. They weren't researching them. They didn't care about them. And anybody that did was, a lunatic. Right. I mean, we all know that's the way it's been. But I think one of the coolest things is, and this is kind of selfish, and I'll say we when I talk about ufology, it really was a vindication of the UFO community, because all along we had been saying, Oh yeah, the government, it is interested and it is studying them, but we had no proof. And then this came out and it's like, hey, you know what? No, we're not stupid. We're not, fanatics. We're not conspiracy theorists. What we are is right. Mm-hmm. And, you lied to us the whole time. So I think that is a bit of vindication, and it felt good to hear it.
That is a really good point. I remember when this story first broke, before I could even really get excited about it, I was going around telling everyone, I told you so, I told you so. And now, I mean, we've got almost a year since the story broke, like I said earlier, and we're learning a lot about the program. I mean, we're learning that there was a sub-program called, what was it? OSAP, I believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is like an offshoot with Bob Bigelow and Skinwalker Ranch. And this story just gets stranger and stranger, man. When we look at it, $22 million was allocated to this ATIP program to investigate UFOs. Now, you and I both know, and I'm sure most of the listeners know, that's not a lot of money when it comes to government funding, first of all. But now we're learning that a lot of that wasn't given to just search for UFOs or investigate UFO cases. It was being given to a program to study this very secretive, highly paranormal ranch in Utah. So what do you make of the whole Skinwalker Ranch thing? We had the documentary come out this past year by Jeremy Corbell, and this place just seems to be a haven for weird stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I did read the 2005 book, and I did see Jeremy's film, and it's fascinating, and it's actually pretty scary, and it's hard to wrap your head around what it is. But the fact that this was a scientific approach, scientists studied this, and as we begin to learn, the government was in fact involved, and this was taken quite seriously, and some very, very strange stuff has been studied and at least verified that it occurs. I'm sure they still don't know exactly what it is, but definitely weird stuff. And to that connection between ATIP, OSAP, BAS from Bigelow, and NIDS, and all, to see that all these things are fitting together, or have some connections. I mean, I would never have even connected those dots, and to find out that they are that's another fascinating study into a different, the structure of ufology. I mean, it's wild.
It is. And the fact that this sort of rogue entrepreneur billionaire is the one tapping into all these things, you really do have to wonder, like, what is his personal motivation? Bob Bigelow we're talking about, behind all of this. What is he hoping to gain? Does he want that one answer to the UFO mystery, or what is it that is really driving this guy to get his fingers in all these paranormal pots, as it were? I really do wonder that.
Yeah, it's hard to figure, but you know what? I'm glad he did. I'm glad he's involved. I mean, think about what would you do, or what would I do if we had $1 billion to spend? We're gonna spend it on ufology, right? We're gonna try and figure stuff out. And so, to me, it's just really cool that somebody who has that kind of power and those resources are utilizing them to study this topic, and hopefully something's going to come from it that we'll all be able to benefit from.
Right, that we'll all be able to benefit from. That's a really good way of looking at it. When a lot of people ask me, like, what do you want out of ufology? What do you want? Do you want to give, do you want the public to know the truth about everything? And yeah, of course, my short answer is yes, I want the public to know the truth. But at the end of the day, Shane, I think this is a deeply personal journey for all of us, and at the end of the day, I want those answers for myself.
Yeah.
It's a very selfish field as well.
Yeah, but I mean, that's natural, right? We all do want to know the answer to this mystery. But yeah, I'm in that place too, where that's the destination, which it would be really great to get there, but I don't want to overlook the journey. I enjoy the journey to get there. And I realize maybe in my lifetime, we're not going to get to the destination. We won't know that answer. But so if I just focused on that, I would probably get discouraged, but I'm focusing on the journey, and I find it completely fascinating. The people and the information and all that goes with it is it's just a trip, and I just love it.
I couldn't, from one weirdo to another.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. It really is about the journey. I want to know how that journey sort of began for you. How did you first get interested in UFOs? What made you eventually become a UFO investigator?
I look back and I ask myself that question because, I had a background that was, quite religious, and this whole concept, wasn't really looked at favorably, let's say. Mm-hmm. I'm no longer involved in that and not related to the ufology. But as a result of that, I have been able to pursue this more deeply. But I was 8 years old when we landed on the moon. And so like every other kid in America, I wanted to be an astronaut and, just interested in all things space. And I'm a total space geek. But along with that is, interest in sci-fi and, of course, UFOs. But I didn't really pursue it, as a child and then young adult. And then I got caught up in life, got married and had a kid and tried to, earn a living and just really didn't focus on that until something happened. And I can say I've never seen a UFO. I've never had a paranormal experience at all. I'm doing this just out of intellectual curiosity. But in 1997, I was a resident, still am, of Phoenix, Arizona. And when that Phoenix Lights incident happened, I know where I was that night. Again, I didn't see anything, but we were at some friend's house about 35 miles north of Phoenix. We were having dinner, and then we're going to look through the telescope at the Hale-Bopp comet. And so a lot of people were doing that evening. So this is probably why there's so many people who made reports, but I was not one of them. But I was very captivated by the media coverage, that night and for many months or years really after. There was just so much coverage of it. And I thought to myself, there must be something to this. And so I started watching, your typical UFO shows on cable, UFO Files and other things, and didn't really seriously pursue it, but it had my attention. And then in 2010, I decided, I'm going to read a book. I just happened across the book, The Day After Roswell, written by Corso and Burns. I read that thing and, no offense to anyone, but at the time I thought, this is just not entirely credible to me. And I almost decided to bag the whole thing then, but I thought, you should read more than just one book to see. And then the next book I read was Linda Cain's book, UFOs, pilots, generals, and public officials go on the record. And that one blew me away. It was written, by a professional investigative journalist, and the cases she selected were, excellent and lots of, case data. And I thought, okay, now this is some credible stuff. So I quickly learned a lesson that in ufology, you kind of have wheat and you have chaff, and you've got to have the ability to, identify those. And then I followed those up. I had the good fortune of stumbling across Richard Dolan's 2 volumes of UFOs in a National Security State, I think is what they're called. And I thought those were fantastic because his style of writing, as an academic, came across, and he was profiling, I think, mostly like Blue Book cases. And it was just kind of like case after case. And, these people were having these experiences. And how could thousands of people, have these experiences and there not be something to it? So at that point, I was hooked. I was convinced that there is something to this. And so, I consumed everything I could on UFOs, every book, documentary, whatever. And then I got to a point where I'm not saying I knew it all, but, I felt like, kind of have all this knowledge. What am I going to do with it? And I'm just the kind of person that, I got to play. I got to engage. I got to, I can't just sit there and watch. I've got to get my hands dirty. And so I looked for an opportunity to kind of interject myself into ufology instead of just being a consumer. I wanted to, participate. And I looked around, and since I've been a government employee for 20 years and been in the corporate sector before, and I knew I could thrive and function well in a large organization. And of course, my attention had been drawn to MUFON, an organized effort to, accomplish something in ufology. So I joined, and then for about 3 years, I was just a member. And then I decided, I'd be interested in becoming an investigator. And I'm about 3 years away from retirement at that time. And I thought, I'm going to wait till I retire. But I had attended a MUFON meeting, and Jim Mann had talked to me, and he convinced me, go ahead and do it now. And, we won't overload you, because I was worried about, family and work and all that. And I didn't want to get involved and not be able to, do it justice. So he said, we'll be easy on you, the caseload and stuff. And so he held true to his word. I'm managing it. I've done maybe 40, 45 cases. And, it has been the best experience of my life. I mean, the people I have met, the things that I have learned is just fantastic.
See, that's the thing. But I am not a member of MUFON, and I never really, I didn't realize how big the caseload actually is for investigators. And what a lot of people don't realize is that you do volunteer for these things. It's not like investigators are getting paychecks like Mulder and Scully did, I mean, this is out of your own time, your own pocket most of the time, and a passion to help people who've had these experiences. So for you to say like 40, 45 cases or whatnot, that's astounding to me that many cases are just in one area of the United States, and that these things are happening in every state, every country, every continent, all over the world. So oh God, that number that amazes me.
Yeah, I think we have over 100,000 cases in the database.
Wow.
If you can imagine that, yeah.
And not enough investigators, I would assume.
No, there's not. But, we do the best that we can. And, we do look into every report. Every report is investigated. And, there's even a time frame. Of course, if there's special circumstances, it can go longer. But the idea is to, keep these things moving and, really respond to people, because if somebody has had an experience, it's mostly a traumatic thing, at least a, emotionally impacting thing. And you want to address that for people. You want to help them. You may not be able to identify what it was or what it was not. But in the end, they've got it off their chest. Somebody listened to them. They weren't being judgmental. And, it makes them feel good that, hey, my experience has gone into the historical record forever.
And it is. It's a closure for a lot of people, too. I mean, I spent 2 years going around the country interviewing people about their experiences. Everything from lights in the sky, which we should tell people, too. I mean, just seeing lights in the sky can be a very, very powerful thing for some people. It might seem mundane, but for someone else, it might be paradigm shifting. And, I spoke to people up to claiming abduction experiences or close encounters. So a lot of the time, just telling it to someone can be enough for them. And if that's what we can do, then besides finding an answer to it, then I think that's a good thing for sure as investigators. Well, I have to ask you, among all of those investigations you've done, are there any cases you're willing to share with us or can share with us that really stood out to you?
There's a couple. Let's just say I've done, 40 some cases. Out of those 40 some, I think 4 or 5, about 10%, ended up being a true unknown. And I guess you could say we would call that a genuine UFO. I mean, it's unknown. I wasn't there. I didn't see it, so I can't say what it was. Or no one can prove what they are yet, right? But a true unknown, and it's a pretty rigorous investigation, and I think the 10% shows you that investigative process does eliminate a lot of misidentifications. I think out of all those cases, maybe I had one that was a hoax, and it wasn't like an outright hoax. It was more like they probably knew what it was and that it wasn't a UFO, but they wanted to make the report anyway, kind of a thing. But that's a very, very low percentage of the cases. Most of them are misidentifications, but others are not. And so one of the ones that comes to my mind was kind of interesting. And again, these are all going to kind of sound bizarre, and I'm not just focusing on, the ultimate outcome, but, again, the process is pretty interesting, and you can just see kind of how weird it is. And it's a difficult thing to get your head around, but it can be done. So the first case comes to my mind is happened in Green Valley, Arizona, which is kind of outside of Tucson. And there was a couple who were driving home one evening. It was about 8 in the evening, and they were going from Dairy Queen to their house. And it's an area where there's some subdivisions, but they're adjacent to just open desert. And, if you live here or been here, you can kind of get your head around what that looks like. And so it's pitch black out in the desert. And so they were driving along a road that kind of like on the left side were subdivisions. On the right was this open desert. And they saw a light in the distance. And, there's air traffic around there and stuff. So they kind of thought, it's probably an airplane, but it's bright enough that it caught their attention. And then it began to get closer and closer and closer to where they estimated maybe it was like 5 miles out. And looking at it, it became clear that it was no airplane. And in fact, what it looked like to them was a vertical pencil, maybe 100 feet tall. And the bottom portion of it was red. Top portion was like yellow. They said it kind of reminded them like a lightsaber. It had this light emanating from it, but it didn't cast, light shadows and things like that. And so they pulled the car over and were looking at it. And then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, it jumped to about a mile away from them where they got a pretty good look at it. And then in the next instance, it jumped and it was right over their car. And so they were looking through the windshield at this thing, and they could see, the bottom portion, but it was so tall that, out the windshield, the roof of the car blocked the view from the rest of it. And it stayed there. They were just shocked, both of them, a husband and wife. And these are highly educated people, master's degrees. These, seem to be very credible people. And they were just floored by it. And they just sat there stunned. And then the thing just blinked out. And so then they headed home and they talked about it, and, they just couldn't, come up with any explanation. They went through the whole airplane, balloon. Was it a cell tower? Was it power lines? Was it blah, blah, blah? And, in the investigative process, we kind of do the same thing. You find out, I contacted the military bases nearby, the sheriff's department, the local newspapers, and, you check for reports either in MUFON or New Fork or API and all these things, and could find, nothing. And so in the end, I had to call it an unknown because there was no conventional explanation that would explain that. So I thought that was kind of a cool one. And then we had another one that was a couple that hiked down in the Grand Canyon. And, for people that don't know, it's a pretty good hike down in there. And then, it's like 10 or 12 miles or something too. There's a ranch. Oh, you have?
Yeah.
I never have. See, so.
Oh, it's amazing. You got to get out there, man.
Yeah, I heard it's just beautiful. But down there, there's, it's fairly remote. There's some cabins and a lodge, but, no roads or anything, lights and all that. And it's fairly primitive. And they were walking down a trail. And it was dark already, but you could see, the canyon walls and then the sky above it and a little bit of moonlight and that kind of thing. And they saw a couple lights that were dancing around up there, clearly above the canyon wall. And they descended down to below the canyon wall. And then they were zipping back and forth in the canyon. And this was probably, a quarter mile away from them. And they were just fascinated by this thing, and they were watching and watching. Eventually, they flew off back over the top of the canyon wall and were gone. And so, one of the things I checked was, with the rangers, hey, do you guys allow drones down there? And it's like, absolutely not. That's against the law. Well, could there have been like a media company filming and have a license to do it and stuff? And they said, no way. Clearly wasn't an airplane or helicopter. You would hear them, and they certainly wouldn't be flying, below the canyon walls. And then, of course, I was thinking, the only reasonable explanation would be a drone, but I could not find any evidence of that. I have a hard time imagining, a couple guys would backpack drones down in there 12 miles or whatever it is and just fly them around in the dark. I mean, it's rough terrain. You could easily lose your drone. I mean, I just didn't see that as being a possibility or a likely one. And so that ended up being an unknown, and, who knows what it was.
Yeah, see, I mean, that true unknown, if 99% of these things can be explained, it's that true unknown, that 1% that keeps us going, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's fascinating.
Those sounded great, man. Thank you for sharing those with us. I know a lot of MUFON cases are confidential, but I really appreciate you bringing those forward. I did want to sort of circle around to some really interesting articles that I also came across of yours over at Rogue Planet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you recently started writing for Rogue Planet, maybe like a year ago or so?
Yeah, or 6 months or so. Yeah.
Okay,
It's
cool.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Fun.
yeah, I was so excited when I first saw your first article pop up over there. If anyone's interested, just go to rogueplanet.tv. We talk about all different weird stuff over there, but we've got our resident MUFON Field Investigator writing over there too. So the first one that really caught my attention, we had the recent passing, unfortunately, of Senator John McCain, and a lot of people may not have known this, but he actually has a connection to a very well-known UFO event, the Rendlesham Forest incident.
Yes.
And you did a good write-up about this connection. So I'd love maybe if you could briefly run us through how the hell was Senator John McCain connected to a UFO event?
Yeah, I was fascinated by that too, and obviously, as a resident of Arizona, I had a lot of occasion to hear John McCain and to see him, and he's maybe I didn't always agree with his politics and stuff, but he definitely is a an interesting guy. He was very intelligent, and he basically, I mean, honestly, he just loved a good fight. Mm-hmm. And what happened in this case was, many people are familiar with the Rendlesham case, and in that incident, two soldiers, Jim Peniston and John Burroughs, came in contact with a UAP, an unidentified aerial phenomena, something that landed on the ground, and they were in very close proximity to it. Without rehashing the whole case, fast forward, John developed some health issues. And of course, as a former soldier, he would receive treatment through the VA. And when he was having this health issue, the VA doctors requested that he get his medical records. Well, when he went to do that, he was told you can't have them because they're classified. And it's like, what? Whose medical records are classified? That was very weird. And so he researched and found it was related to the fact that he was part of that Rendlesham case. And so he was desperate to get those records because his health issue was life-threatening, and the doctors needed his case history to find out what was going on. And so he kind of exhausted all of his resources and ability to get the records, and the military just wasn't going to budge. And so, as a resident of Arizona at the time, he decided, well, I'm going to see what John McCain can do. Again, as I mentioned, John McCain, he's always up for a good fight, especially if there's an underdog or he thinks there's some injustice being done. That's the kind of thing that he just lived to tangle with. So,
especially as a former veteran, I would assume too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, oh, absolutely. And so he went to bat for John, and ultimately he was able to get those records released. John was able to provide those to his doctors. He received that medical treatment, and of course he's with us today because of it. And really, that's the connection of John McCain. Not necessarily directly a UFO issue for him. He was helping a fellow soldier. And he was trying to right a wrong that he felt had been perpetrated against him, and he threw his weight around and he got it done. So when John had died, I was really kind of moved by that, and I thought, this is just something I got to share with people, because I'm certain it's a side to him that no one knew about. And so for people in ufology, there's a connection even to John McCain.
Absolutely. And, in terms of the Rendlesham Forest incident and John Burroughs' involvement, this is one of the first documented cases where Veteran Affairs admitted that someone's health issues were directly connected to a UFO event. That is a huge step for ufology, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And I think even in fact with Project Condign that the Ministry of Defense had put together, they buried in like the 600 pages was a matrix or a chart that showed the types of injuries that people sustain when exposed to certain types of UAP. Now that blew my mind. You mean there is enough encounters that they're aware of that affected, people in a medical way, that they could create a matrix or a chart and associate, injuries with a type of UFO. I mean, that's a mind blower. And of course, that likely was speaking of John in as part of those statistics.
Well, Shane, there's some really interesting articles I came across as well over at Rogue Planet from you. One of them that really caught my attention too is something I came across a lot in my own UFO research, and that's an article you titled "Why the Silence During a UFO Sighting." So could you maybe run us through what prompted this article and just exactly what you came up with in terms of theories of why so many people report complete silence during a UFO sighting? I know I personally had this happen to me too during my event, so I'd love to hear what you got on this one.
Oh, that is very cool. I didn't know that you had experienced it yourself.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And to me, so the way this happened is, in some of my investigations, other individuals had that experience as well. And it became part of my standard questions when interviewing a reporting person. And, I asked them, did you notice, any unusual noises or odors and, kind of the other senses that you don't necessarily think of when you see a UFO, you're all focused on the visual stuff, right? But there's these peripheral things that, to me, that is a form of physical evidence. And so I was really fascinated by that. What is it that's happening? And it happens frequently in these cases. And, so I wanted to know how common is this? And is there an explanation for it? And so, I kind of just illustrated a few things in the article, like, have you ever been walking through the woods? Most of us have at some point. There's leaves rustling and there's crickets and birds and, things going on all around you. And I don't know if you've had the experience where they just suddenly stop and go quiet. And, it could be like, maybe there's a predator out there and all the little critters know, ooh, I better be quiet or I'm going to be somebody's lunch. Maybe that happens. Or when it snows, a real heavy snow, and you're out of doors, and it just has that dampening effect on the environment. So, there are some very real properties of physics that explain how, in some cases, the noises stop. Okay. However, with a UFO, obviously the presence of that UFO is a factor, right? And so, how could you explain this? Let's say their propulsion system or something about them, do they create some kind of field that has an impact physically on the environment? Maybe there's a bubble, plasma or something, or, whatever around them that blocks out, sound waves. Or, is there something about the craft that maybe has a physical effect on us? It interrupts what our ears can hear, or maybe it's, affecting the environment and sound waves can't travel through it, or I don't know, I don't know what the reason is. However, to me, it looks very much like physical evidence. There is making an impact on our environment that are subject to our rules of physics. And so to me, that would be a very interesting thing to study, to try and recreate. And it might help zero in on what kind of technology is being used by these crafts to produce that kind of an effect. Mm. So I just, just one of the things I'm kind of fascinated about. So I decided I'll write an article, put it out there, and I got a lot of comments back. I mean, some really great theories that people put forth, and it's obvious many people are aware of this and have given it some thought. So that was probably one of my most fun articles in terms of the response that I got back.
Because I'm sure everyone has their own theories on it. For me, personally, I attributed it to my own, fear or adrenaline, or just, when something so immediate happens and you feel like things go in slow motion, that sort of thing. That's kind of what I attributed my senses failing me at the time to. Yeah. But when you look at these external forces, that maybe the craft itself or technology or occupants of said technology are involved with that's when it's really fascinating. So that's so
Yeah.
cool that you got such a big reaction to that one, because I'd honestly never seen anyone else write about that.
Yeah.
There's been some books written on, paranormal stuff, on, odors and, sounds and this and that. But when it comes to UFOs, I'm going to tell you, man, you're probably one of the pioneering people writing about that. So,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It really caught my attention. So I just had to say something about it.
awesome. Well, I'm sure your research on that has only begun. But
Yep.
there's another case that has been researched to hell and back, and that is the Roswell UFO Incident.
Yes.
So, we've got a reboot of the Roswell TV show coming back very soon. This case is known all over the world. It's a part of pop culture. And you recently had the opportunity to go to Roswell for the Roswell UFO Festival with Jason McClellan, our mutual rogue planeteer. So
Yes.
how was that experience? I recently made a trip to Roswell for reasons that are still classified, but I'll get to that in the very
Okay.
near future. But
Cool.
how was that experience? And I want to know what your personal stance on the Roswell case is. I'm putting you on the spot again, my friend.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. It was an absolute ball. We had a great time. I've attended several UFO conferences, of course, and they're fairly academic, and it's more about the information and all that stuff, which is great. Love it. Not a criticism of it at all. Love it. But I really never got involved in really what I'd say is kind of the pop culture side of ufology. And the fact is that Roswell Festival is just flat fun. I mean, people are dressed up. There's booths everywhere. There's bands, and they're all dressed up like aliens. And, every shop in that town, I mean, they shut down like 8 square blocks of the downtown, and every business had stuff in their windows and people coming in and out. And, they had food trucks and stages and just all of this stuff. And it was so fun because everybody there was having fun about this topic and enjoying it. It was something I'd never experienced, and I got such a kick out of it. It was a total ball. Now, as far as my view of the case, I mean, as you mentioned, it's been talked about more than any other case probably. And I think my ideas changed as I became an investigator a little bit on it. But I will say this: where there is smoke, there is fire. Okay, and that's proven true in life, in many areas of life, and even in my investigations with MUFON. I mean, there is something to that case. There's no doubt about it. Now, ultimately what it is, we may never know. Or we may find, a revelation, an admission or something on the part of the government in the years to come that, really reveals what happened. But you just can't have hundreds of people involved in something, just making it all up. Now, there's bits and pieces and, how a story can change and all of those things over time and from person to person. But to me, at its core, there had to be something quite extraordinary. And I will always think this, that there is no way that the military released a press release saying we caught a flying disc by accident. That is not going to happen. Yeah. So then they had to go backtrack and undo what they did. So, why? I don't know. But like I said, I think where there's smoke, there's fire. There's something to that case. And, there's been some really good work. Of course, Stan Friedman and Don Schmidt and Tom Carey and others that, have really dug into this thing. And there is a lot of detail. You just have to look for it. So what you hear on TV and kind of just bandied about social media and things like that, it's just really the tip of the iceberg. And there's a ton of facts and data behind that. So what it is, I don't know, but I think there is something to that case.
Amidst the fun stuff at the festivals, and even when you go to the International UFO Museum in Roswell, it's a little cheesy. There's a lot of sci-fi pop culture sort of stuff around there, but then it's
kitschy.
It's kitschy and it's fun. And that is, I'm learning the more I get involved in the UFO field is you have to have fun, or you are going to be depressed as all hell with all this stuff. But amidst all of that kitsch, you look at some of these affidavits that they have at the museum from people involved. There was one I recently came across from one of the people that was on the plane that went from Roswell to Wright-Patterson with the wreckage. And that was really one for me where I'm like, holy shit, man. Like, no matter what that wreckage was, what happened, the cover-up was so deep and so big that, whatever happened, it was clearly top secret. Even if it was from here, it was something super top secret. I still don't know where I lay on the whole thing, but something clearly important happened there, enough to silence hundreds of people, and that it remains a mystery up until today says a lot as well.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, here's another, sort of pop culture-esque thing that's going to be making its way to the mainstream very soon, and that is Project Blue Book. Now, I am looking right now at your image, and you have a Hynek t-shirt. Shameless plug for the Hynek t-shirt over at the Somewhere in the Sky store, if anyone's interested.
And I highly recommend it.
Oh, well, thank you, man. It's a fun one for sure. But I did that because I respect the work of J. Allen Hynek probably more than any UFO researcher out there, and we're about to get a fresh take and look at him in the upcoming History Channel show Project Blue Book. So, I want to know, what do you think of this show? There's a lot of contention before this thing is even being released to the public about how accurate it's going to be. So what do you think about a fictional version of actual events coming to the mainstream public here soon with Project Blue Book?
I actually had the privilege of attending a screening here in Phoenix of it earlier this month. And they played basically the first episode, and they had the producer there, and then they had a panel discussion on it. And I am very excited for it. I am stoked for it for several reasons. One is, it's UFO content. Yep. Anytime we can get any UFO content, I'm there. I mean, I love it. I appreciate it. I want to see it, hear it. And the fact that the History Channel is investing in this tells you that there's an appetite for this out in the public. And the more that good content comes out, it helps spread the message. It helps people become acquainted. It reduces that taboo of not being able to talk about it. So from that perspective, I think is totally awesome. The second thing is, it's not a documentary. You will be disappointed if that's what you're expecting. It's not intended to be a documentary, and it's not one. What it is a fictional drama, and it's a fictional drama based on true events. And we've seen other programs like that. Yeah. And they can be very entertaining and good. And this is meant to be entertainment, but it's entertainment on a subject that many people are interested in. And so, this is being produced by Robert Zemeckis. Yeah. He's the guy that did Back to the Future movies. And the quality of this program is second to none. I mean, the writing was terrific. The production value, the scenery, it's sort of a period piece because obviously this started in the 40s and went through the 80s. Basically, it's the life of J. Allen Hynek. So it's sort of a period piece. And I mean, it's visually stunning, and it almost has a feel. And I don't want to make the comparison, in content so much, but it almost has an X-Files feel to it because, the premise is he's investigating these Blue Book cases, and they go to these, locations and meet these people, and all these events go on, and they hit all the right notes on kind of the modern ufological lore and the government's involvement and all that, and the casting is fantastic. One of the main character, I think his name's Aidan Gillian. Yep. He's from what's that show I've never watched, but everyone likes Game of Thrones. Yeah. Yeah. So, they really are investing a lot in this, and I think they've done a terrific job with it. And my DVR is already set.
Me too, my man. I did have the pleasure of seeing the first 6 episodes of the show.
Oh, no way.
I was
Awesome.
granted the golden key for that for some reason. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. I am totally jealous.
I must have an in somewhere over there at the History Channel. But
Yeah, that's neat.
I have to agree with you, Shane. This thing is stunning. From everything from the costumes to the special effects to the acting to the writing. This is television at its finest, and I have no qualms with saying that at all. If you're going into this looking for a documentary, like you said, you're going to be very disappointed. This is a drama. It is a drama. That's what I'm trying to tell people. A lot of people are looking at it. They're seeing this image of J. Allen Hynek looking at an alien in a tube and saying, that never happened with Hynek. I can't believe they're doing this. And all I have to say is just wait. Wait and see. Because not everything is what it seems when it comes to this show. And that's the last excuse I'll give to it. I'll let the show stand on its own, speak for itself. But the week after this episode is airing, we're going to hear from the creator and the showrunner of Project Blue Book. So I'll let them tell the audience what to expect. But I'm with you, man.
How cool.
I think this is just going to do a great service to J. Allen Hynek. No matter if it is fictionalized or not, it's going to bring his life, his career, and the work of Project Blue Book to the mainstream. So
Absolutely. And that's a win-win for everybody.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Well, sort of the last thing I want to touch on with you here, Shane, is disclosure. That big word with a capital D. A lot of people think it's already happened. A lot of people think it's never going to happen. So I have to ask you, as a UFO investigator and having been involved with this topic for a while now, what do you make of the whole disclosure movement, or what do you consider disclosure of the UFO phenomenon? That's a very big question to ask you, but yeah, what do you make of all that disclosure?
Yeah, so that is a great question, and it is sort of a fundamental, part of the lore of ufology, and rightly so. People, are interested. I mean, ultimately, it's a question of, does somebody know? Tell us so that we know too. But it's a little bit tricky subject. But in my opinion, the reality of the UFO phenomena has already been disclosed. It has been disclosed a million times. I'm exaggerating, but many times throughout history. And here's the thing, and this is, I kind of go off on these tangents a little bit in my thinking, but what fascinates me is, okay, why is there such disagreement or confusion on what disclosure is in the first place? I think, well, why can't anyone agree? And, what's going on? Well, when you think about it, not everybody views a given line of evidence as proof. It's so let me just say, like, for example, there have been statements in government documents that do in fact talk about the reality of UFOs. And there has been in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And I'll say most recently with ATIP, I mean, to me, it has been disclosed that there are objects in our sky that we cannot identify that display attributes that indicate they don't originate at the hands of human beings with our current technology. That's not even disputable anymore, I don't think. To me, that is disclosure. Now, of who they are and what they want and all of that, well, we certainly don't know that. Now, there could be people that do know that, and they're keeping that to themselves, okay? But I don't think you can dispute the fact that there's a reality to the existence of these things. So, and it's been, disclosed in documents over and over and over again and again, like most recently with ATIP. You have the director of a semi-secret program to study these things and coming out saying, yes, we do it. It's real. We don't know what it is. And they're producing evidence such as videos and testimony by radar operators and pilots. And what more do you want? And so when I wrote that article, that's kind of one of the things I approach is, well, what will people accept as formal disclosure? Is it the president of the United States has to call a press conference and stand there and tell everybody, like in Independence Day, hey, folks, now we know we're not alone? I mean, for many people, it appears that is the only thing that they will accept as disclosure. Mm-hmm. Okay. But it's already happened in terms of that, the reality of that being confirmed. And this is another word that's being thrown around is confirmation. That these things are happening. So if you're a person who's waiting for the government to do it in that way, I think you will likely never see it.
Yeah.
The only way that's going to the way that it will likely happen, in my opinion, would be that they make themselves known in a public way. It's up to them to disclose their presence to us, because our government is not going to do it. Their fingers are too dirty. They have too much history. How do you explain that? Yeah, we've known about this for 70 years, but we kept the technology to ourselves, or we've weaponized it, and we've denied, use of technology that could have freed us from fossil fuels 70 years ago, and blah, blah, blah. But, forgive us, never mind.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. So it'll probably be disclosed in a way that most people would accept by them, not us.
Exactly. I think that's a good way to look at it. If there is some sort of non-human intelligence behind this controlled mechanism of the UFO phenomenon, it's going to be on their timetable. I couldn't agree more with you on that. It's never going to come from us, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think to myself, why do we give the government that power over us? Why do we say the only way we're going to believe it is if they say it? I mean, I make a kind of a smart comment in the article, but that's like saying the only way that we're going to believe that the rooster's disappearance is if we, ask the fox.
Yeah.
The fox has to tell us that the rooster disappeared. I mean, it's not the right place to go to ask that question and expect an honest answer. So
no, and the government is much dumber than people think. In some ways. No offense, I know you were a former government employee, so no offense to you, Shane. But
none taken.
At the time of recording this, we're probably going to see another government shutdown. It's clear that the government is so compartmentalized that they probably wouldn't know what the UFO phenomenon was to begin with.
No, absolutely. And I even kind of use that logic in my own case, working within any large organization. Doesn't even have to be government. You don't know what the guy 5 cubicles over does every day necessarily, or on another floor in another building. I mean, it's almost like a family that you have a certain way of doing things and certain information. Well, you don't hang your dirty laundry out for everyone to see. You don't tell everybody all these things that could be embarrassing. It's not that you're trying to be secretive or hide things. It's just, hey, that stuff's not anyone else's business, And I think organizations are like that as well. I'm not going to go out and advertise something that's really just our personal business, and not that I'm hiding it. So I think, that happens in government, and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. And there's a lot of reasons for that, good reasons and bad reasons. Sometimes it's, silos because there's jealousy, or it's legitimate. This business process is completely different than this business process. There's no link between them. Why would I know about those things? I mean, like I said, once you're involved on that level, you understand, it's very easy for some piece of information to just completely get buried or lost. Exactly. So I think that's what's happening.
Yep. Pretty sure that whoever was working next to Luis Elizondo wasn't like, hey, what's going on with that Tic Tac thing over there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, boy. Well, I have to ask you, as a field investigator who's looked into so many UFO cases at this point, what advice would you give someone just coming into all this? Where should they turn to look for credible information about UFOs, and how can they get involved with actual investigations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I was fortunate enough to, hit the right note at the right time when I got into it with MUFON. In fact, I'm writing a book now that I hope to publish soon. That is about my experience, like a beginner's guide to researching ufology, because as I mentioned earlier, there is wheat and there is chaff. And there's also this whole political veil over all of it that can kind of block you from, determining what's really good information and bad information. So, my recommendation certainly is, read all that you can and get a variety. And, in your mind, you just need to be on guard, knowing that, some of this information is going to range from complete and utter nonsense all the way to, maybe some very highly technical and complex information and everything in between. And you're going to have to kind of calibrate your BS meter, so to speak, and try and sort that out. But the good thing is about, the UFO field is, we police ourselves pretty well when it comes to the nonsense. Now, there's a ton of it out there, especially on social media and that kind of thing. But when you get down to some serious research, people do their due diligence. And, I would avoid a lot of the, sensationalistic stuff, some of the YouTube stuff. And not that everything on YouTube is bad, but, we know there are certain sites that promote this sensationalistic stuff. And it's just, it's so unfortunate, but, there must be an appetite for it. So, but if you want to be a credible and serious researcher, read credible and serious books by serious and credible people. Same with documentaries, and just be aware that there is an incentive out there for people to produce false information. And it's really to, sell videos or clickbait and all those other things. So you just kind of got to educate yourself in that way and be aware. But once you get to that point where you feel like you have a good handle on the knowledge through your personal research, make sure you hook up with other people. That was probably the biggest thing that, helped me grow quickly is, I was able to connect with people like you and Jason and Maureen and, Alejandro. And then, I came into contact with Richard Dolan and Nick Pope and all these people who were at one point they were just my heroes and people on TV. The next thing I'm having dinner with them. I couldn't believe it. But this is when you insert yourself in a positive way, you engage with others, that's all we want. Like I said, this ufology is about people, really. And, when you engage like that, this is really the quickest way to grow. So that's what I recommend. Connect with people on Facebook, read some good books and watch good documentaries and go to these UFO conferences and, insert yourself and engage and play. Yeah. And, you're going to grow and you're going to thrive. So, I'll put a plug in for MUFON. I know there's plenty of criticism out there about MUFON, and some of it's legitimate and some of it's not. But I can say my experience in, 2.5 years of being an investigator has been absolutely nothing but fantastic and positive. Get great leadership and training and backup and support and great camaraderie through it. And, it's the best thing I ever did. And, I highly recommend it.
That's awesome, man. It's so good and refreshing to hear and see through the lens of such a optimistic and positive person when it comes to the UFO field. There's so much backbiting, with any organization or field, as it were,
yeah.
And negativity, that to have someone like you out there pushing the positives and taking that personal journey and still being excited about it after all this time of all of us never getting the answer we seek. It's so good to hear that. So where can we find out more about what you're up to and what to expect about this upcoming book of yours? I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. Well, certainly you can catch me on Facebook, Shane Hurd, and Twitter. You can go to Rogue Planet and keep up with me there. And, go to MUFON.com. And feel free to email me. My email address, and I'm going to give that out to you, is hurdranch@aol.com. I'll be happy to engage with you and share anything I can to help you in your own growth.
This has been a really fascinating conversation with you tonight, and it was upbeat, and that's exactly what I needed heading into this new year. So I have to thank you for doing that, and I have to thank you for coming on Somewhere in the Skies.
Oh, well, thanks so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I would really like to encourage people, if they're interested, go at it in a positive way. There's a lot to be done out there, and you will be welcomed.
That's it for this week's episode. Again, my thanks to Shane for joining us. Please take a few moments to subscribe, rate, and review Somewhere in the Skies on the largest podcast platform, Apple Podcasts. You'll be helping the show gain visibility and new listeners. Please also subscribe to our growing YouTube channel for exclusive content. Just search for the Ryan Sprague channel. Project Blue Book premieres next week, so be sure to head on over to the official Somewhere in the Skies store to get your Hynek merchandise. Visit teepublic.com and search for the Somewhere in the Skies store. That's teepublic.com. We're on Twitter @SomewhereSkies and Instagram @SomewhereSkiesPod. Thank you to our sponsor, HelloFresh. Thanks also to the E1 Podcast Network, KGRA Radio, Rogue Planet TV, and most importantly, to you for listening. I'll see you here next week, and remember, keep your feet on the ground, but never stop searching somewhere in the skies.
Somewhere in the Skies is produced by Third Kind Productions in association with the Entertainment One Podcast Network. To learn more, visit entertainmentonepodcast.com.